In the peak of the Indian summer, heat is a constant, but in Gauri's home, it was a tool of control. As an orphan living with her aunt and uncle, her days were defined by the sting of the sun on open courtyards and the burn of kitchen tiles where she was forced to work on her knees. The cruelty followed a specific rhythm. At night, for the smallest mistake, she was banished to a windowless storeroom, a cramped, airless box that trapped the day's heat inside like an oven. Inside that darkness, she faced the most visceral part of her punishment: swarms of mosquitoes. Locked in the sweltering room without a net, she spent her nights in a state of constant, agonizing agitation. This isolation was only broken by the violent sound of a heavy iron bolt sliding back. Aunt Kahlo would drag Gauri out in the early hours, forcing her to haul heavy buckets of water from the pump, while the rest of the house slept in air-conditioned silence. These weren't just random acts of anger. By weaponizing the climate and systematically depriving her of sleep, Gauri's relatives ensured she remained in total physical and mental exhaustion, making her easier to manipulate. This arrangement was threatened when a wealthy family, the Agarwals, sent a marriage proposal for Gauri. Suddenly, her grandparents were traveling from the village, the same grandparents who held the legal deeds to Gauri's significant inheritance. Her abusers pivoted instantly. To hide the evidence of their treatment, they bought Gauri cheap, long-sleeved clothes and applied heavy medical creams to mask the mosquito welts and bruises on her arms and face. Her uncle issued a final cold warning. If she spoke a single word of the truth to her grandparents or the groom, her departure from the house wouldn't be for a wedding, but for a funeral. Minutes before the wedding car arrived, the trap was sprung. Her uncle cornered her with legal papers, refusing to let her leave until she used her ink-stained thumb to sign over the entirety of her village property to him. Her relatives used her desperation for freedom as their final leverage. By holding her future hostage, they successfully traded her release for every asset she legally owned. Gauri's arrival at her new home, her sasural, was a total sensory shock. The stifling storeroom was replaced by a quiet, air-conditioned bedroom, where her new husband, Akash, encouraged her to rest on a plush, high-end mattress. But Gauri couldn't settle into the comfort. Terrified that she would be beaten for spoiling the expensive sheets, she spent her first night huddled in the corner of the floor, shivering in the cold air she wasn't used to. The breaking point came the next morning. In her uncle's house, sleeping past 5 a.m. meant physical violence. When she woke up in her new home and saw the clock at 10 a.m., she spiraled into a panic. When her mother-in-law entered, Gauri collapsed, clutching the woman's feet and sobbing. She begged for mercy, waiting to be dragged by her hair or thrown out into the sun for her laziness. Instead, she was met with quiet confusion and a plate of warm food. The Agarwals didn't see a servant who had overstepped. They saw a daughter who deserved to rest, and they treated her accordingly. While Gauri's physical surroundings had changed in a day, her internal map was still set to the rules of her uncle's house. Unlearning that fear requires more than just a new room. It requires the repeated, radical experience of safety. The secret finally unraveled during a video call with her grandparents. They saw Gauri flinch at small movements and heard the way she talked about her past punishments, and they finally understood the reality of what had been happening behind closed doors. Realizing their theft was about to be exposed, her uncle and cousins ambushed Gauri at a local temple. In a final, desperate act of violence, they physically attacked her, trying to force one last signature to seal their control over the land. But Akash and the police were already moving in. The cycle of abuse was broken as her relatives were arrested on the temple grounds, their legal threats finally replaced by the reality of a jail cell. Months later, during a trip to the mountains, Gauri sat by a river in the freezing night air. This time, she was wrapped in a heavy wool shawl, sitting by a fire with her husband, no longer searching the shadows for a threat. Cruelty can build a house, but it cannot sustain a home. Gauri's journey shows that while abusers can steal assets and years of peace, they cannot survive the light of a supportive family. Do you believe the prison sentence her relatives received was enough for what they did? Tell us in the comments.